This is a continuing series of talks that I've been giving over the last number of years, mainly about mindful living. But lately I've struck upon a new phrase that I think I'll start calling this series now, and that is the art of noticing. And what I like about that is, first of all, it's a little more descriptive than mindfulness. Mindfulness has now become almost a throwaway word. It's being used everywhere. And all mindfulness really means is noticing the world around you and noticing what's going on inside of yourself and just taking notice of what's happening. So the art of noticing is kind of like something that we can maybe, by studying it, by using it, we can get a little better at it. I don't know. It resonates with me. I hope it resonates with you all too. So tonight I wanted to do a couple of things. I want to end the evening with a guided meditation. I don't normally do that, but I have a theme that I want to build a picture around, and to allow us all maybe to get a little taste of what I want to talk about initially here. So, it's been said, it's been written that any talk on Buddhism isn't complete unless it contains three elements. And those three elements are the idea or the principle of selflessness, the idea that there is no self, interdependent co-origination, which is a very fancy way of saying that everything occurs in this moment spontaneously and all at once, so that everything is interconnected. It isn't an addition, it isn't things adding on to other things. Everything occurs. It like arises all at once. So us, everything around us, the entire universe is manifesting itself, if you will, in this very moment. And the third thing is nirvana. And nirvana, again, is one of those words that has had many meanings over the years. In the Buddhist description, it actually means to extinguish the flame. It's like blowing a candle out. And what it means is that nirvana is the end of all concepts, all labels, all things that we put on things so that we don't see them for what they truly are. If we removed all concepts and all labels, we would end up with what the Buddhists call emptiness. And emptiness isn't empty, it's just there is nothing there to grab a hold of. And that comes out of a very old philosophy that's described in some of the Vedas from the Hindu philosophies. And in the Hindu philosophies, the Hindu wisdom books, there's a series of books called the Upanishads. And the Upanishads were the stories of the teachings of the wise men, which were called rishis, back probably 2,000 years before Buddha even lived on this planet. So the Upanishads are basically the stories told by wise men to their students in ashrams in the mountains of India. And ashram means forest academy. So these people would live out in the woods, and they would have students, and students would go and learn from them. They'd go from one teacher to the next, spend a few years with each, learning the wisdom ways, if you will. And one of the underlying principles of the Upanishads is the concept that everything is just as it is, and that there's no explanation or no way to attach a label or a meaning to what's behind everything. And literally in the books, they refer to whatever this principle is, whatever this underlying, again, there's no way to put a word on it, but they just refer to it as that which is. And there's a very famous saying throughout Eastern thought. In fact, there are books that are titled this, and that is, I am that, which simply means that you are no different than everything else, that you are completely inclusive of everything else, that you are no different than anything else. You are simply a manifestation of that with certain abilities being in a human body. So to get an idea of that, to get sort of a flavor of that, because that's a really kind of an expression that can be taken many different ways. It's something that doesn't, at least on the surface, make a lot of sense until you start to kind of understand what was trying to be conveyed. And so I want to talk about awareness or perception for a few minutes, and then I want to do this guided meditation that hopefully will give us all a little bit of a taste of what is meant by that phrase. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was levels of awareness. Now, when someone tells you, or you read in a book, a wisdom book, that you are that you are no different than everything else, and everything that is contained in the universe is contained inside of you, most people, I think, I know originally when I read about these principles years ago, I would just sort of smile and go, yeah, I guess I could see that, but I don't feel it. You know, I'm still me. It's like, well, what do you mean I'm everything? I'm me. So I wanted to just sort of walk you through a visual representation or a mental imagery of different levels of awareness. Now, the first level of awareness is the one that we all live in, and that is the fact that we all believe ourselves to be separate from everything else. That we have our own thoughts, we have our own emotions, we are contained within our bodies, and that we stand as separate from everything else around us. We experience everything else around us, but there's like a line at our skin that says this is where we stop, and the rest of the world is out beyond that line, if you will. And that's basically the normal human experience. But if we look a little deeper and we try and understand what some of the wisdom teachers have been saying for the last 4,000 or 5,000 years, trying to understand what is it that they're pointing to that I'm not seeing. Maybe one way to get a little closer to it is to think about circles or spheres of influence or awareness in our own lives. When we're completely focused on what can I get out of this experience? What am I looking for? What are my needs? What are my wants? I look at things and decide how they can benefit me or hurt me. We're on that first level of experience, the experience of a separate self. And there are other levels of experience that we've touched upon, but really haven't maybe noticed or acknowledged that it's a little broader view than our everyday, what's in it for me kind of idea. So if you can just imagine that we're going to start at that one level of the self, the individual, the separate self. Now imagine at different parts of your day or different parts of your life, you have had people around you that you have a strong connection with, be it lovers, husbands, wives, children, whatever. Now, when we start thinking about our life with those people, and we start to think, well, how do we get something out of life? What's good for my family? What's good for my friend or my lover or whatever it is? We've raised up a slight level from me to include someone else or some small group of people like our family. And what happens is our level of awareness is now expanded, and we're starting to think about not just ourselves, we're starting to think about a couple of other people as well, and what would be good for them. And we can start building these layers of awareness where we can start thinking about our larger, more encompassing family, relatives, and we can expand that out to community, and we can expand that out to county, country, state. You know, it can go up. The more we include others in our awareness, the larger the circle of awareness becomes, and the more we have to take in consideration to think what's best for now a large group, or even if we want to go all the way up to the top of our experience, which I would just, for simplicity's sake, call the world. So what's best for the world? All of a sudden, we're up many, many layers. And when we're at that layer of thinking, well, what is it that is best for the world? At that level of awareness, when we think about, well, what's best for me, we realize that there's a huge difference between and distance between that level of awareness. What might be good for me is not necessarily good for my family, or might not necessarily be best for my town or my community or my state or my country or my world. I might think that something that would be very good for the country, but might not be so good for me. I mean, I'm sure that there are things like that. I'm not going to try and throw out examples of that, but you can well imagine on all those levels of awareness that there are things that we have to drop off, that we have to not consider anymore if we're looking out for the well-being of more than just ourselves.